All right, you lovely people. I hope you had a nice little stretch of the legs there. I stretched myself a little bit. You know, it's healthy. It's good to do. Anyway, I also hope you had maybe thought while you were doing that stretching about, is Peter Singer right? Is his argument right? Throw that argument back up there. Here it is. That simple little argument, right? I mean, does this mean that you and I, again, all of us who are not ourselves in poverty, do we have an obligation to start donating more money, our luxuries, to charity? And it is a really simply looking argument. It's very simple looking, but it's got some big implications that are important. And I would say not just for our actions. Of course, for our actions, it's saying we need to donate, but I think it's got some other implications for how we understand, moral issues, perhaps, or certainly at least how we understand the moral issues surrounding global poverty. So the first of these issues that the first implication I want to mention is that Singer dwells on is that proximity is morally irrelevant. Proximity, how close you are to the problem, is morally irrelevant. And I mean like physically close to the problem. Because the problem seems to be on the other side of the planet, in sub-Saharan Africa, say, or maybe in, I don't know, wherever poverty is. It seems to be in further, it doesn't seem to be in places that I'm seeing right now. Though that said, with the advent of COVID, this might be a bigger issue. But then again, even with unemployment in the United States, I don't know if people are doing as bad as they are, say, with like parasites and other things that we see afflicting people, and, like malaria, tropical disease, the things that are affecting, not only are they dealing with the pandemic, but they're dealing with a whole host of other stuff, say in sub-Saharan Africa. But again, just because a problem is physically far away from us, Peter Singer says that's morally irrelevant. So again, proximity is morally irrelevant. So it doesn't matter if the person who is suffering is right in front of me where I can see them. Say when I'm driving down the street, do I see them? Or whether they are thousands of miles away in sub-Saharan Africa. It does not matter. And now, why is that? Why does Singer think that proximity is morally irrelevant? I think he gives us 2 points that he makes on this to kind of explain why. And he says, well, first, we must have an impartial concern. We must be impartial, again, with an impartial concern for basic interests. There is nothing that makes me and the people that I just happen to know, nothing that makes us more deserving of aid and assistance. Just because I happen to know you doesn't mean, or that you're related to me even, doesn't make you or that person I know more deserving of aid, especially when those I know are not suffering like those in poverty. I don't know anyone. I'm trying to think. I don't know anyone that I know of anyway who is suffering like those people who are suffering in extreme poverty. And so what Singer is saying is we have to be impartial. We can't be biased to our friends and family. Again, we look to who is suffering the most, and that should determine who we help. So again, it's not who you know, but who is suffering the most. That's how we should decide. We should alleviate that extreme suffering and not just try to make our friends and family happy. Unless, of course, they're really suffering too, of course. So again, we should be impartial. It's not who you know, but who is suffering the most. That's who we need to be helping first. So that's proximity doesn't matter because we should be impartial. That's the first part of why proximity doesn't matter. Now, there's another reason why proximity doesn't matter. It's that we now today in this modern world, we all have the ability to actually help those who are thousands of miles away. Yes, a couple hundred years ago, you'd help the people closest to you because that was the most efficient way to help is those who you could actually see, because how would you get that money or food or whatever to sub-Saharan Africa? That, would be next to impossible a couple hundred years ago. But today, in our interconnected global, world, we can no longer say that it's better to help those close or easier to help those close to us. No, it's just as easy to help my neighborhood as it is to help those in sub-Saharan Africa, especially when those in sub-Saharan Africa, as we've already said, are doing much worse than those in my neighborhood. So we no longer have that excuse that it's better to help those close. It's more efficient to help those close to us, because there exist tons of organizations supply chains, blah, blah, blah. All sorts of stuff that globalism has created that make it, you can help someone go to givewell.com. You'll see. There are very efficient ways you can donate to others where the overwhelming chunk of your money will be used and won't be lost in the transfer. So again, what Singer is saying here with these things is that proximity is morally irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether the person suffering is in front of you or 1,000 miles away in sub-Saharan Africa. And this proximity is not relevant because, one, people close to me are not more deserving than those who are farther away. We decide based on who is suffering, not who's got the most suffering, not who's closest to me. And second is that today we do have the ability to actually really do help those people who are farther away. So that's the first implication of Singer's argument. Proximity is morally irrelevant. Now, the second implication of Singer's argument is that it is morally irrelevant that many others might be failing to assist. As Mr. Green said in his video, I am no less obligated to help a drowning child just because there might be millions of other spectators watching the child and doing nothing. So again, just because a lot of other people are doing nothing doesn't mean that I can just blend into the crowd and not do my, not help either. Because again, if I can do something, I'm supposed to do something. That was the whole point of that premise about that strong principle there of helping out or alleviating suffering, is that if you can, you should. It doesn't matter if other people are not doing their job, not helping. Then I have to step up and do my part, no matter what. Now, when it comes to like a big issue like global poverty, yeah, there is a huge coordination problem because I need to know who's donating where and how much and how they're all doing that. And then I have to look at that and figure out, okay, well, how much should I be donating? How much do I have to do? And yeah, if lots of people are giving and donating, yeah, I won't have to give as much because that'll all come together and help out. But if other people are not donating, then I have to really step up and do more. Both to help and also hopefully to motivate others to also step up and do the good. But again, if others aren't doing it, the only thing that means is that you will have to step up and do your duty. And it doesn't matter what they're doing. What they're doing just determines how much you have to do. Because maybe if more are doing it, then it's easier. But if fewer are doing it, then you have to step up and give more to because those are lives you could be saving. But in either case, you have to be doing something. That's what we're seeing here. So you're going to do something. It doesn't matter if what the other people are doing. You will do something. Just how much, that'll depend on what other people are doing. If everyone else is giving a lot, then you don't have to give a lot, just some. But if no one's doing it, then you got to do as much as you can to make up for that. You won't be able to do everything, of course, but at least you'll do more. And so again, we've seen now two implications of Singer's arguments. Proximity is morally irrelevant, and the fact that there might be many other people just letting them die, well, that's irrelevant too. So two things are morally irrelevant: how close you are to the problem and what other people are doing. From a moral perspective, you still need to do something, assist. And we can add then to this a third implication. Now, this one might be where things get a little really controversial, shall we say, because what Singer's argument does for number 3 here is that it redraws the distinction between duty and charity when it comes to how we respond to poverty. Now, what does that mean, this distinction between duty and charity? I think we all know this already. It's just maybe fancy language. I don't know. But let's start with duty. So what is a duty? Well, a duty is something that you are morally required to do. A duty is something that you are morally required to do. And yeah, if you fail your duty, you do not do your duty, then I'm sorry to tell you this, but you are a bad person and we can blame you for that. You messed up. Shame on you. You're a bad person. Yeah, if you do not do, you are expected to do your duty. You are morally obligated to do your duty. And if you don't do your duty, I'm saying duty and I'm trying not to giggle because that has a funny meaning if you are old like me, maybe. I don't know. Duty. You guys have probably no idea what I'm talking about. But if you get the joke, isn't it funny? Anyway, what was I saying? Duty. Now I can't hold it together now. Duty. For instance, I have a duty to grade your exams fairly. That is, I hope you agree. I think you probably do. Professor Gray, my duty is to grade your exams fairly. And if I fail that duty, then yeah, I'm a bad professor and I'm a bad person. That's bad. Yeah, so I have a moral obligation to be a fair grader in this class. I think you all agree with that. But duty is often thought to be something different from charity. Because charity is something that you are not morally required to do. In some sense, charity is often thought to be morally optional. What do I mean, optional? Yeah, if you do charity, if you give to charity, we will say you are a good person. Well done. We're proud of you. We'll praise you. If you give to charity, you're a good person. Great. But if you don't give to charity, if you fail to do charitable works, we might not call you a bad person. You're just a person. So that's the idea that charity is often thought to be optional. Duty, you have to do. Charity, optional. Do it, we like you. But if you don't do it, it's like, okay. We're not going to blame you. We're not going to call you a bad person. And we normally think giving to the poor, giving to poverty, we normally think of that as charity, Singer says. Again, we'll praise you if you give to the poor, but we won't blame you or we won't call you a bad person if you don't give to the poor. Typically, anyway. But as I said, Peter Singer confesses. He doesn't deny it. He says, I am redrawing this distinction between duty and charity. Why? Because Singer says, when it comes to poverty, assisting those in poverty is a duty. You have to do it. This is no longer a matter of charity. It is no longer optional whether you assist. You have a duty. You have an obligation to assist those. Because note, I'll throw it back up there. The conclusion of that argument there is not optional. It says quite clearly that you are obligated to assist those in poverty. This is no longer optional. So this is not charity in that sense. This is a duty, something that you are obligated to do now. And so this is because of this argument, this last point, is that this is where people really start to challenge Singer and are very uncomfortable with Singer's argument because they're saying whoa, man, dude, this is too much. This is too radical of a change in how we understand morality, or at least the morality of world poverty, because most people would think that assisting those in poverty is charity, not a duty. Yeah, it's nice if you help those in poverty. We'll say you're a great person for doing that, but we're not going to say you're a bad person if you don't. And so that's like often the criticism Singer gets, is that this just is no longer common sense. Common sense says, help poverty if you want, good on you if you do, but no one's going to say you're a bad person if you're not helping. And Singer's response, I told you what to expect. Anytime you have a criticism of Singer says, he just kind of sits back and goes, okay, throw up the argument. There it is. Look at this argument. Where did I go wrong? Just because you don't like the conclusion doesn't mean the argument is wrong. In fact, he says, hey, maybe it's our notions, these common sense notions of morality, at least when it comes to poverty, maybe those are wrong. Maybe this distinction between duty and charity when it comes to poverty are wrong. Maybe those are what need to change because world poverty is a big problem. It's not a small problem. And he says, look, hey, after all, I think this might be even true, is that for the majority of human history, slavery's been thought of as perfectly normal and morally acceptable and not a problem. In some ways, it's a fairly recent innovation that we've come to the conclusion that slavery is morally wrong. And Singer agrees, right? Yes, slavery is bad. But he says, yeah, today, now, we all agree slavery is a huge problem. But the abolitionists from a couple hundred years ago were thought as crazy radicals who were trying to upend our notions of morality by claiming that certain people, all people were equal and no one could be the property of another person. They thought, you're crazy. You're trying to upend our whole economy here, which is based on slave labor. Watch Hamilton.
A civics lesson from a slaver. Hey, neighbor.
Hey, neighbor. I like that quote. Anyway, was I saying? Yeah. people used to think slavery was normal. Now we don't agree. We see slavery or at least was a huge problem. And there's no excuse today for letting slavery continue. Owning slaves is not optional. Owning slaves is wrong, period. And what I think Singer would say is that maybe it's time for us today, now, to realize that world poverty is a real big problem too. And now there is no excuse for letting world poverty continue. World poverty is not optional. World poverty is wrong, period. And so we have to do something about it if we can. Again, we could do something about slavery. We didn't own slaves. Done. Ditto for poverty. Here, we can do something. Donate, help. In any case, I've covered now 3 implications of Peter Singer's argument. The first implication, proximity, morally irrelevant. 2, it is morally irrelevant that many other people might be failing to assist. Doesn't matter. 3, the distinction between charity and duty needs to be reconsidered, at least when it comes to how we respond to world poverty. And we saw that last point starts to make people uncomfortable, this breaking of the distinction between duty and charity, again, what we're required to do and what is optional. People don't like that. And though Singer's response to that is, look, maybe they do need to change because world poverty is a big issue that's causing lots of suffering. 10% of the world's population. That's a lot. And then when we look in sub-Saharan Africa, right, it jumps to like 40% of sub-Saharan Africa lives in extreme poverty, less than $1.90 a day. That's what the definition is. And so look, he's saying this is a big problem. So maybe some of our notions of morality will have to change to realize that this is a big problem. It's not optional. We have a duty to do something. Anyhow, so we've seen some interesting implications. We've seen a challenge, and we've seen, I told you, Singer's usual response. He usually admits that, yeah, that's going to happen, and he doesn't see it as a problem or a challenge at all. He thinks it's not a bug, it's a feature. We'll see. I don't know. You have to think what you think about that. But let's take another great place to pause, take another break. I think this is the perfect snack break time because I'm going to have you next watch a very short video from Professor Sullivan about the demandingness of morality. So why don't you grab a snack, watch that video, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about how this idea, this demandingness of morality, applies to Singer's argument. But get that snack, off you go. Listen, be a good student for Professor Sullivan. Say hi to Megan for me, and I'll see you back here in a moment.